More on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let's talk to a global affairs analyst, Calvin Dark, who joins us via Zoom from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. NATO has pledged unyielding support for Kiev from the alliance, saying it will not back down from providing aid to the country. What's your reaction to this first? Mr. Dark, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So, NATO has actually pledged unyielding support for Kiev, from the alliance, saying it will actually not back down from providing aid to the country. How do you react to this?
Well, I think that one of the challenges, there are two main challenges that are kind of on my radar. One is we realized from this conference, in Romania and through statements, made by Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials, that this conflict needs more than just military aid. That while it is definitely important, there are other, infrastructure with the power grid, humanitarian needs, particularly as we enter into winter. And I think that's one thing that folks are realizing. The other thing is, I think world powers, including where I am in Washington, D.C., the United States, need to be more clear about what the strategy is. Because whenever there's questions about, what's the timeline, what's the objective, what's the next move, it always ends up being something like, we'll be with Ukraine as long as it takes. That's going to be very hard to say that without a defined plan, because domestic audiences in these countries, including my own, as we face winter too, are going to be wondering what exactly our commitment's going to be and how are we addressing our own problems here at home, not just continual, perpetual helping of Ukraine.
Well, then, talking about the United States, role in this, the President Joe Biden said providing more military assistance for Ukraine was a priority. But then the Republicans have talked about pausing the funding, which has surpassed $18 billion or thereabouts. What kind of bottlenecks do you think this might pose for the more raids Ukraine might require?
Well, that's going to be a very big issue, particularly starting in January, when the new Republican-controlled House of Representatives comes into power. Just for a little bit of explanation, one of the things that we say about the House of Representatives here is the House controls the purse strings. And what that means is anything dealing with budget or money has to be approved by the House of Representatives. Now, Joe Biden will still be president, and he is still the one to direct our foreign policy, and he can do and say whatever he wants, but if it involves money, he has to get the Republicans' approval. And we've seen that there are very influential Republicans who have made it very clear that when they take over control of the House, they are going to, if not stop, look at, review how much we are giving to Ukraine, and that is not going to be helpful for the conflict at all, but it's a reality.
But then you will recall that half of Ukraine's energy infrastructure is either damaged or destroyed, and it's already having knock-on effects on the health system and on people's health. What's your reading of the conditions of the Ukrainian are finding themselves at this point in time?
It's not only is it dangerous, it's been dangerous since the conflict began, but it's also very, it's a humanitarian issue. And what we have to keep in mind is that as winter comes in, the Ukrainians are going to need a lot of support for the infrastructure. We know that Russia is targeting them and targeting the electricity grid. Why? Because he knows that that will decrease morale and the spirit of the Ukrainians, which makes it a lot easier for Russia to continue its invasion. So that's going to be really tough for the Ukrainians as they enter into winter, not only for the physical dangers, but just having the morale to keep pushing through with the infrastructure and electrical grids being damaged and destroyed.
Well, there have also been several rounds of similar waves of, missile strikes, basically designed to cripple Ukraine's power infrastructure to plunge the country into darkness. Do you think Russia is succeeding in breaking the will of the Ukrainian people?
I think Russia's succeeding in two ways. One, as I was saying, when you strike the infrastructure and electrical grid, you're going to really strike the morale of the Ukrainians. But also, Russia understands that the longer this goes on, the longer, even if they are not winning or advancing as Putin said they would, if they continue this, there will be fatigue from NATO, from the United States, from other powers, and he's depending on that because once that fatigue sets in, he'll be able to do what he's tried to do from the beginning, and that's take over all or part of Ukraine.
But then, looking at thousands of HIV patients in Donetsk who may soon run out of critical antiretroviral drugs that help keep them alive, with the fact that much of Donetsk is under Russian control, how imperative would creating a humanitarian health corridor into all the newly regained and occupied areas, how would it be?
It's going to be difficult, and I think that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about like the strategy. This is an untenable situation like the ones you mentioned and some of the other humanitarian and threats to people's safety. There needs to be a solution that is long-term, not just continuing to set up these systems and these partnerships like the contact group that the U.S. set up when not resolving the conflict. And so I hope that they'll be able to do that.
Well, then we'll see how these continue to go because the world is actually tired about talking about this issue of Russia-Ukraine war. Just want to see an end to it and the humanitarian crisis this has actually created. Global Affairs Analyst Calvin Dark, thank you so much for your keenness of insight always. Thank you.
Thank you.